Hi everyone, how are you doing today? I wanted to talk about 1984 and Brave New World. Now, I know this isn't the most original video, so I'll admit that right off the gate, but I'm really curious about something and I want to ask you the question and kind of give my own theory about it, which is why is 1984 more popular than Brave New World? First off, I just wanted to go over my claim that 1984 is more popular because I don't know if that's obvious. I think it is, but I want to defend that statement first and then get into my reasons I think it is more popular. So, first of all, I just anecdotally hear about it more often than Brave New World. 1984 has become synonymous with dystopian fiction, right? Even among people who've only read the book casually for school or just, as a one-off kind of thing, people do use it to talk about dystopia, about various new technologies, surveillance, maybe certain government policies or politicians. So, anecdotally, I hear about it a lot more than Brave New World. Now, let's get into some facts and figures, if you will. So, I was looking into this and I hit up Wikipedia, of course, and I wasn't able to find something super definitive, but what I did find, and this is from a variety of sources, including a biography of Orwell, but according to Wikipedia, the novel 1984 sold about 8 million copies by 1970. Now, for context, it was published in 1949. So you're thinking, all right, that's quite a long time. That's like 20-ish years. What's the big deal? So within its first 2 years, we're looking at something around 25,000 copies. Actually, probably more than that if you count the copies it sold in the United States. So even in its early years, it was selling in the tens of thousands. And in 1984, it actually topped the bestseller list. Maybe just because of the name, right? And it returned to the bestseller list as an Amazon bestseller in 2017 for reasons I won't go into here because they are political. But it's had this good run. It keeps coming back to the bestseller list. Let's just put it that way. Now, Brave New World, on the other hand, so this is B&W. This was published in 1932. So it was published a good 17 years earlier than 1984. So it's had a longer run, but it doesn't seem to have sold quite as well. According to the HarperCollins website, it's enjoyed great success both commercially and critically when it was first published. It sold over 23,000 copies in its first 2 years. But there's nothing about it, coming back to bestseller lists in subsequent decades. So I think it's safe to say that over these two novels' lifespans, I think 1984 has done a bit better. And the last thing I'll finish with here in this section is showing you the Google Trends for each of these books over the last 5 years. Google Trends measures how popular things are on Google's search engine. And I know ChatGPT has changed this a lot, but let's bear with the Google Trends for a minute. Even here you can see that 1984 has done much better on Google search than Brave New World. So let's just say 1984 is more popular. All the signs are pointing to it. So what are the reasons for this popularity? And I will go over my theories. So number one is simple, I think. Celebrity endorsement. Now you might be thinking, well, they're both classics. I mean, how important is celebrity endorsement and what kind of celebrities are we talking about here? So Stephen King included it on his list of top 10 books for Goodreads. David Bowie wrote a song called 1984 and had dreams of making a rock musical out of it. So, just in terms of sheer visibility, these kinds of celebrity endorsements, especially by people like Stephen King, right? That matters. People look at those lists and they think, oh, I should read that because Stephen King likes it. It inspired him. Just a couple of examples. There are more we could name. And I think in the US and in the UK, you'll see both of these novels referenced, but 1984 gets referenced a lot more, and by people on both sides of the political spectrum. And why is that? Well, I think that kind of just leads into point number two. So I think that 1984 has stronger world building, and what I'm calling iconography. So, one of the things I think is important about a book's longevity isn't just its language, its story, the good feelings people get from it, but I think it's also the visual aspects of it. And obviously, we're not talking about a film here, but books still have visual elements, symbols, if you will, motifs. And 1984 has them in spades. There's been many videos done on this. Orwellian, Big Brother, doublethink. These are terms that have entered in the common parlance, if you will. And even Airstrip 1, which is the fictional Britain in the book, is sometimes used to refer to the UK today in satirical political commentary. Security cameras and other visible forms of surveillance also make us think of 1984. And most of the book most covers of the book feature some variation of an eye or an eye symbol, and I'll show some examples on the screen. I was actually surprised just how many publishers have followed this motif for the cover, and pretty much all of them, not all of them, but most of them, use the eye symbol. And interestingly enough, the only other place I'm aware of this happening is on the Kafka covers in this particular paperback edition, where they use eyes as well. But other than that, I think 1984 has a monopoly on the eye covers. I would also say it's more appropriate because Kafka's only vaguely about surveillance. Kafka is more about bureaucracy and alienation, but that's another tangent. I digress. 1984 also features one of the most memorable rat scenes in literature. Won't spoil it, but it's right up there with the rats from Dracula. So we've got rats, we've got eyes, we've got cameras, a whole slew of different things. Now, Brave New World also has a lot of world building and sci-fi concepts. The drug called Soma is the most memorable, but it doesn't take up the same visual and cultural space. Brave New World's list of recognizable and memorable symbols is much shorter, and it doesn't invent a lot of new vocabulary or terms. Huxley relies instead on puns, like substituting Ford for Lord, and cheeky uses of famous names like Marx and Lenin, or Lenina in his book. Brave New World is full of sly humor. Sometimes it's even kind of charming and witty like P.G. Wodehouse. But Huxley's approach is to satirize things we know, whereas Orwell immerses us in a different world that feels familiar. And I think these are different things. They're similar but different. And I think it really impacts the way people remember and talk about books. So my third point here, for why I think 1984 is more popular, again, we're going with popularity here, I think it elevates sexuality within conventional plot points. So what am I going on about here? So I think, just to put it more simply, I think sex helps sell the story for most readers. So we've got the main character, Winston. He is a frustrated and sometimes hateful incel, unhappily married. He begins a passionate affair with Julia, and this affair takes on political significance as a clear action taken in rebellion against the government. So their relationship follows familiar, I would even say cinematic, notes. And Orwell doesn't get too creative with this, except at the ending. Though Winston and Julia's relationship is far from healthy, Orwell uses it to try to connect the average reader to the story and reinforce that human bonds are more powerful than propaganda. Their repeated encounters frame the story and help move the plot along, again, within those sort of conventional plot notes and tropes. Huxley's novel, by contrast, explores a range of ideas, and he goes into romance, he goes into chivalry and sex. There are some sex scenes, but they are kind of bizarre and are posed as part of the problem, the state cultic control, rather than an act of reasserting agency. So in Brave New World, sexuality is portrayed as more alienating than anything, and we don't really see a strong relationship between characters in this way. The focus of Brave New World is about an outsider named John, who re-enters society after life on a reservation. And the book leans into that, his perspective, him re-entering the world or experiencing dystopia for the first time. It doesn't really center around a relationship, and the sexual scenes feel more like him experiencing this world kind of in a slice of life way. It's not really a driving force in the plot the way it is in 1984. So to kind of sum up this point here, I think both novels deal with sexuality in off-putting ways, but I think 1984 adheres to certain tropes, and it's just a bit more accessible, and it makes that relationship so central to the conflict in the story. Okay, moving on. So number 4, and this is one that I'm not claiming originality in any of these. I think this one in particular has been talked about quite a lot. So historically, 1984 has made Western readers think of dictatorships in far-off lands. Brave New World, with its hedonism and apathy, is too close to home. And again, I'm saying this in sort of a historical sense. So Huxley actually did read 1984 and wrote to Orwell about it. And, basically what he said is he didn't think the brute force oppression style of 1984 was the way things were headed in the West. Huxley thought that narcotics, both literal and metaphorical, and generational brainwashing would lull and lead people gently into dystopia. Huxley sees people's guard, like losing their guard basically, and just getting really, really comfortable with the way things are. Does that sound familiar? Versus more of this heavy-handed authoritarian approach that we historically associate with, countries far away. So I do think this is still relevant, even though we live in such a changing world. I do think books where the government is a clear antagonist, I think these sorts of books are more palatable than books where we ourselves are part of the problem. Not to say Winston and Julia aren't problematic in different ways, but I do think that there's sort of this clear distinction between their issues and like this overarching oppression they live under. And I think that Brave New World exposes these personal weaknesses and failings that might lead us to surrender our rights and our free will. I think Brave New World really encourages people to do a bit of soul searching, but it also makes us uncomfortable, It's weird and wacky, but it makes us uncomfortable in a variety of ways. Whereas I think 1984, the parts that are uncomfortable aren't so much things it's pointing out about us as much as things it's pointing out about the state, okay? So, yeah, these are my theories, and I would love to hear what you think. If you also find that 1984 is more talked about in your circles, why do you think that is? And do you think that these novels are still relevant to us today? Do you think that 1984 has any special things about it that make it better than Brave New World, so that maybe its popularity stems from particular merits and not just these things I've mentioned here? So, which I guess just to sum it up, I do prefer Brave New World a little bit more. I'm not a huge fan of either of these books, but yeah, I think that the things I've named, I don't see them as necessarily merits, but just differences. So, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.